He was truly the gentle giant.
Fans, take a look at this. Can you believe that? Perhaps even, let's compare it to the size of my head.
The giant stunned the entire world with his size standing at 7 feet 4 inches and 520 pounds. And he was even nicknamed the Eighth Wonder of the World, in which he died 1998, leaving behind just one daughter upon his death, and everyone's eyes have looked to her, hoping she would continue her father's tradition. But it's not uncommon for children of well-known parents to follow in the footsteps of their parents, and Robin, the daughter of Andre the Giant Christensen Rousoff, wasn't an anomaly, garnering similarities to her father in addition to not only for her prowess in wrestling but also for her size. How large was Robin? According to some, she was even greater than her father, but was this accurate? Stay put and discover out, and you may recognize him as Andre the Giant. He was born Andre Rene, but he was giant. Rousimov in Coulommiers on May 19, 1946. He reportedly weighed an enormous amount of weight, 13 pounds at birth, and he would suffer a terrible much larger from this point on throughout his. Andre's tenure as a professional wrestler was frequently praised for being a Grenoble native in the Alps of France, but he truly developed 40 miles east in the small village of Molière, and he was the middle kid of Paris's 5 children, and none appeared to Andre experience this growth spike. But most people think that his grandfather seems to be taller than the current. Some persons were born with what was deemed normal. With Andre's silver spoon, it was determined to ensure his family's survival. He worked on crops but were only able to earn enough to endure. From an early age, Andre started to exhibit gigantism symptoms, but it was probably dismissed as a gene he'd inherited from his grandfather. The indications were no longer disregarded, as he was at the age of 12 he reached a height of 6 feet 3 inches. And following that he continued to develop. His parents and those around him quickly started to understand this wasn't typical and was, instead, a really peculiar event. Particularly because he hadn't shown any indications of a hormonal imbalance at the time he was a child. He began going to the neighborhood school when he became 6 years old, and was initially eager to learn. The majority of people don't know, but Andre did. Brilliant intellectually, and math was even his preferred topic, and he also happened to have a strong athletic background and played soccer for the school, where he primarily played goalie. People who grew up with him even made references to considering that it was almost to get the ball past Andre is impossible. Which isn't shocking at all, because by when he was 10 years old, he was a sturdy 6-foot wall with Andre's. His dad forced him to drop out of school because of the family's financial difficulties, following observing that he could complete the tasks of 3 males by themselves on their family-run farm. That Andre personally observed logic in this, as he had lost all of his enthusiasm for school, particularly because he thought at the moment that he would become a farmer. Hence he didn't require education if he was destined to become a farmer. Sadly, Andre will shortly be leaving the farm, become disinterested in working on it, probably because he felt strong could be put to better use, more fruitful than tilling the soil. At this point, he started sharing his ideas on what he intended to accomplish, things more difficult in life. At the age of 17, he took the bold decision to. He met a wrestling promoter in Paris, who believed Andre's intelligence and promising professional career. Wrestler Andre agreed to sign the contract, and started a profession that made him one of the most well-known wrestlers on the planet. Interestingly, on the way to and from the school days, Andre occasionally got a ride with his neighbor who became the well-known. In any case, playwright Samuel Beckett wouldn't need to be concerned about providing. Andre's ride was far longer than as soon as he reached the legal age of 14. The moment he dropped out of school and started to labor on the farm owned by the family. According to Andre's family, it was at this point his circumstances became increasingly apparent as he matured. By the time he turned, he was almost 6 feet 6. 15. They would not discover until Andre experienced acromegaly decades later. a hormonal imbalance when the overgrowth is released by the pituitary gland. The condition's hormones may result in gigantism. Something Andre and everyone having children people started to notice him as he struck a growth spurt around the age of 14, but the development never stopped, and ultimately it led to his expanded chest, hands, and feet. The shoe size was an amazing 22 and in. His hands appeared to be a typical beer can. Sadly, Andre's little padlock his size made things challenging for him. And not merely because he was always becoming the target of cruel insults and appearances, but since they don't actually construct anything for the world's giants. Examine everything that surrounds us. Is designed to fit our perception of human size. To be typical, consider the time when dials for telephones were still used. Because he was unable to utilize his fingers, Andre chose to use a pencil any time he had to make a phone call instead, and he was a wrestler, which required him to make roughly 300 days for wrestling each year, yet he was unable to fit himself into the airplane restroom, and as a result have to urinate continuously in a bucket edition. Barring his ability to employ a vehicle that was tailored to his dimensions, and it was quite painful to taste drive. Andre informed reporters that there he frequently had to ride for hundreds of kilometers in the front seat of an automobile, and his neck and back usually became really rigid and grew up with acromegaly was particularly challenging. Since he was unaware that he had a chaos during that time in his life, everything he was aware that he was unique as he was not diagnosed by doctors while he was having grown up in France. It is commonly believed that the initial diagnosis he received was perhaps in 1970 in Japan, although he was undoubtedly diagnosed with the disease following addressing a fractured ankle and by the year 1981. There were already some tried and true methods of treating him, and even though these therapies wouldn't have allegedly halted his growth, that they might have had a significant impact on extending his lifespan even further. Andre made the decision to forego treatment, but it might have extended his lifespan. In the 2018 documentary, when asked why Andre the Giant's physician clarified that Andre's choice was based on his worry that it could get in the way of his, it was beneficial for Andre's wrestling career that appeared to be large. Since this was the primary cause behind his decision to become a wrestler, and the reasons behind his rise to well-known organization worldwide. If you were a wrestling enthusiast in the 1970s and in the 1980s, you would undoubtedly have recognized this large man, and his presence was difficult to overlook, and the fact that he genuinely loomed above everybody provides some humorous relief to the he participated in matches. But while Andre may have seemed a little bit paradoxically, he recognized the positive aspects of his situation, persevered, and eventually he was controlling the professional wrestling scene in the 1970s and in the 1980s. Andre rose to international fame and millions and ultimately discovered crossover achievement in the film business by The Princess Bride, the critically praised film. Toward the conclusion of his career and life at last, Andre confronted Hulk Hogan. In the much-anticipated 1987, sadly, he would pass away during WrestleMania 3. 10 years later, at the tender age of 46 in the height of France, Andre, and it's not shocking that Andre's weight was frequently the focus of unwanted public recognition. With a size that huge, everyone would undoubtedly wish to get a look at him. But Andre didn't express the feeling and instead felt because his interpersonal connections were impacted because individuals only seemed to connect with him because of his size, and his statements were intended to be exploitative of him, and that didn't sit well with him. One advantage of his bulk was that he might consume a lot of alcohol. There are even rumors and conjectures that he might drink 20 bottles or 100 beers, drinking wine while seated. Despite the fact that actor Princess Bride co-star Carrie Elwes revealed that Andre abstained from alcohol for the purpose of drinking, as he was always in severe discomfort because his back wasn't always hurt from bearing his weight, and from wrestlers destroying objects everywhere on him. even though it was verified that his acromegaly was causing him to definitely a huge. Andre's exact his wrestling height is unknown. Career. He was typically referred to as the giant 7 feet 4 inches, yet everyone who observes wrestling would believe that this shows to be exaggerated in character. Then there was his passport from France, which provided a height in meters, which is equivalent to only less than 7 feet 2 inches between these two. Some individuals were divided. Heights, followed by those who thought Andre might have been only 7 foot, or even 3 inches shorter than that. The same problem exists with his weight. Endures because he was frequently said to weigh 520 pounds, although it might weigh more. Using hyperbole in wrestling, as sources think his weight may have changed from 380 pounds to up to 555 pounds at the wrestling at the time of his passing. Andre's career is well known for once saying that he just made use of what God had given him. Earn a living, his size was a major factor. Part in assisting him in overcoming the world of wrestling, and he took advantage of it as much as possible. France is where Andre's wrestling career started. In 1966 under Jean Ferre's name, which is translated as Gentle Giant, and he proceeded to compete in wrestling in Japan. He was referred to as Monster Rousimov in the area. Then he traveled to Quebec in 1971. After 2 years, wrestling matches were selling out as customers flocked to watch the Giant and Andre battle. He had met and started working with Vincent McMahon. Beside him at the World Wrestling Federation, which subsequently evolved into This Is How It Happened, Andre first, in WWE, came to land in North America in 1971, where he began wrestling, in Montreal known as Jean Ferre. During his service and with large spectators, Quebec got off to a good start. Attending his games, but his interest ultimately decreased. Even though they enjoyed the ambience of Quebec, Andre became aware of through his acquaintance, change was required. He arranged for Valois to meet with McMahon, a prominent personality in the field of New York-based wrestling. That describes his initial thoughts on Andre McMahon. A tall, graceful man in his 60s remembers being shocked by the Giant's enormous appearance. My first reaction was, my God, I never saw a man like that, McMahon claims. Went on to add that he had observed photos and video recordings, naturally, and he was aware that Andre was over 400 pounds and 7 feet 4 inches. However, he just wasn't ready for how upon closer inspection, he was unlike anything McMahon was aware of what he had previously observed. He might emerge as the main attraction. The princess is wrestling. Interestingly, Bride Andre had a promising cinematic career. At least he was aware that if he failed at wrestling, he always had the film business to blame. Returning to author William Goldman and Rob Reiner, the filmmaker, revealed their outfit. Opinions about how they felt Andre was the perfect actor to portray the role of the enormous Fezzik in the 1987 motion picture. Rob claims that the Princess Bride provided Andre with a 3-page sequence to audition with, and he was unable to comprehend the Giant's word, but they simply understood he needed to appear in their film, and he still got the part, for sure. Regardless of his lack of a strong background in acting or even his incapacity to, Andre's ability to talk loudly and impressively produced a truly outstanding performance, further demonstrating his multifaceted capacity for amusement. Even though Andre performed admirably in the behind the scenes of the film were utterly awful for him, he acknowledged that the film's production wasn't simple accomplishment for him more than because he had lines to commit to memory. However, due to his back was causing him a lot of trouble while filming. Consequently, stunts were challenging, and when he failed to capture the actress, the production with Robin Wright and his arms team needed to ensure that she was supported by cables, and the fact that it didn't help Andre's size meant that he had to be raised using cables, particularly when he was supposed to ride a horse in the sequence. But the first was not the Princess Bride. André's acting contract before that he had made an appearance in a French movie in 1967 and TV shows including $6 a Million Man and The Fall Guy, 1976, 1982, and the Mickey and Mouse movie just after he completed filming The Princess Bride. André was asked to make a brief appearance in the 1994 movie Trading Mom. Yet, in every part people seemed to believe that none of them fit his identity in real life rather than just playing Fezzik. André was quite pleased with his work that he frequently took with a video recording of the movie and even delighted in putting on screenings of the Gene Christensen film. The entirety of their partnership may never be fully revealed, but without a doubt, John Christensen was an important aspect of André's existence is that we all require a small amount of affection in our life. Whether it comes from our loved ones or strangers we meet at random when driving. Despite the fact that André had millions of fans, followers from all around the world, he required a particular sort of affection. André was renowned for his physique and his participation in the ring for wrestling and on the large screen. Although there wasn't much truly aware of his personal life, especially the bond he had alongside Gene Christensen. Gantry, using the Christensen gene, was born in Minnesota on August 15, 1949. Her Danish ancestry was apparent. Last name that means knowledge, fairness, and leadership in Danish was quite discreet about her family life since the cause that made her so. She became well known as a result of connection with André, although it's thought she wasn't the only child. Despite her association with André being the reason she was the center of attention, Jean wasn't merely André's companion. She gained work as a model in the 1970s and ultimately became a member of the wrestling's public relations industry, and she met this job because of it. André, around the time of their initial encounter, both of them acknowledged that they weren't in any case, they weren't attracted to one another. A spark that appears instantly or anything of the kind. Considering that Jean is more over 6 feet 4 inches, she was happy to have met a taller person compared to her. It is thought that this distinctiveness may have significantly played a part in their eventual romance participation. It's unclear how the two eventually started dating, but shortly enough information about them started to circulate, and they immediately encountered difficulties. According to a number of sources, Jean and André were deeply involved in a relationship, although the precise characteristics of their union is still somewhat of a mystery. Based on their apparent romance probably started in 1972 or 1973 with, according to some stories, they were married but never had the opportunity to formally. Sadly, they did not register their marriage. For these conjectures, marital documents demonstrate that the pair never submitted a nevertheless. A marriage license. Their relationship seemed to be going well, robust, and even endured for years without enduring the fluctuations of a connection that was slammed under the attention, despite the fact that many people claimed the bond between André and Jean was more strengthened with the arrival of their Robin Christensen Rausemoff's daughter. It appeared that their relationship went through a fairly turbulent period at this instance. As André had allegedly refused to accept that Robin was at first, it was his daughter. Only following a paternity test that revealed the youngster used to be his daughter. He took her as his own, thus this was destined to destroy whatever they had happening for them. Robin didn't precisely receive any preferential treatment in spite of being the sole child of such a well-known person. It's really unbelievable that she only met her father 5 times throughout her life. Of course they had some quite fascinating. Their familial dynamics are complicated. Regardless, Jean had a very quiet life alongside André, and even following their relationship ended, she continued to. She tragically died in this privacy, leaving a legacy in 2008 that would undoubtedly keep fans interested. And it's fascinating how historians' tales that are connected yet separate provide a peek into the world of celebrity, romance, and difficulties. But tragically, a new era was about to finish for André, and it would leave many people In complete shock, since decades to come death when someone looks so different they might be held apart from the usual. Highly esteemed or extremely harshly treated for Andre, the most of his existence was connecting these two components of the he was an absolute icon to some, who was incapable of wrongdoing, and he was a fiercely unbeatable wrestler. Greater than life, beyond even death. Many people never imagined that they could touch him, that he would eventually die, particularly not at the ripe young age of 46 at a hotel room on January 28, 1993, in what caused France Andre to be discovered dead. Congestive heart failure was determined to be, as since his acromegaly Andre was left untreated, was said to have traveled to France to pay his family and attend his father's funeral, a brief visit, but he had other arrangements for even terrible when he died himself. Andre has always intended to become incinerated, but in the absence of a crematorium, France could accommodate his body. Was returned to the United States by air, where his ashes were scattered after his cremation dispersed around his North Carolina acreage. It was thought that the WWE Hall of Famer was the real titan of the wrestling industry, both in a literal and symbolic sense. Being among the most well-known and legendary stars in the industry's history produced, he undoubtedly led a life that wasn't. Many might take pride in the fact that he played a significant role in making wrestling a popular sport, despite the fact that he have a brief existence and become Andre's most famous. His on-screen moments will last a lifetime. One instance of this occurred when the world come to witness his famous presence at WrestleMania 3 was quite perhaps this instance that signaled his become a favorite among fans. And let's be, the Hulk is slamming bodies into actual Andre. To be honest, Hogan is among the greatest of all time. Greatest wrestling moments following his passing. A number of wrestlers and Friends entertainment industry co-stars appeared to share their favorites, sending his family condolences and memories. One such individual among friends and admirers was Stephanie McMahon. Asserted that she possessed a cordial association with Andre. She was a lesser-known WWE member. Friendships, which Stephanie freely disclosed her dearest friend from childhood was Andre. Describing how she used to go to his contests and see his unforgettable moments in real time during a Interview magazine, she disclosed that their relationship started when she was 7 or 8 years old.